here and share my presentation with everyone. Okay, so you should be able to now see PowerPoint. At any time, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to stop me. You can use the chat there or just speak up. But I'm very glad to be with you this afternoon. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for your time today and for your participation. As Sean indicated, I am Liz Savick, and I am the Professional Development Coordinator here at CCC Online as of August. In my former role here, I was the Quality Assurance Coordinator. Probably most of you know me as that, the QA Coordinator. Well, we've had a name change, and now it's not QA, it's Teaching Excellence. So right now I'm in dual roles, and with me, my teammate and partner in presentation today is John Reagan, who also has dual roles here at CCC Online. He is our TE auditor, and he's also our program chair for cultural sciences. So again, welcome to everyone. Okay, we thought it would be appropriate at the beginning of this presentation to start with a brief overview of CCC Online's recent organizational changes, as well as the specific changes to the TE/QA form. So just to practice using your feedback buttons, if you could just let us know by way of a smiley or a check mark rather, if you're aware of these changes. If you're aware of some kind of changes to QA, you've heard about that, you've heard about you know, that there's going to be a new form. I'm just curious about that. And this is a relatively new thing, so, okay, so I see some check marks. So some of you have. Okay, very good. And if you haven't, no worries. We're going to talk about that here today. Well, to start, QA, again, now it's TE or Teaching Excellence, used to really only involve a review of instructor performance in discussions, as you all know if you've been with CCC Online for a while. But now we're changing things, so the new process will include a review of not only just the discussions, but also other areas, important areas of instructor performance. And those will include grading feedback, substantive grading feedback, and your use of announcements. So today we're going to still touch on discussion performance. We certainly will address that and address best practices there as we promised in the webinar description. But again, we also want to introduce you to these new TE categories in the new TE process. And again, the new performance categories have been created by our new Center for Academic Excellence. And the next slide is our mission statement. So this just lets you know a little bit about who we are at the CAE. And I won't read that to you. You can take a look. You will notice that the word quality is figured prominently there in our mission statement. By the way, our director is Tracy Trenum, who some of you may know here at CCC Online. You see that also one of the things that we're doing, one of the things under our division is the assessment program. And Tracy's certainly been working very diligently on bringing that to fruition. So assessment is an important initiative of ours, but really overall, we're all about making the classes here at CCC Online and the education we provide the very best it can be for our students. And the CAE is really a supporting organization to help our instructors and chairs and deans and administrators. So this is our mission statement. It's a little longer, continued here. And again, the CAE includes TE, which used to be QA, once again. And it also includes the professional development program, used to be known as professional development and training. And we also under our roof is our library. And we do have a new librarian, by the way, Brittany Dudek. And if any of you are going to be at our Connect conference on September 19th, you may meet Brittany in person. She's going to have a table and she'll also be presenting, just FYI. Okay, and this slide is just to show you that our Center for Academic Excellence does figure prominently on ccconline.org's website. You can see that it's right there in the nav bar, and we have some resources there which we will continually be working to update and add to, just the same way we've had resources on QA in the past and professional development, etc. So just wanted to let you know where we live on the website. Okay, and again, another slide here just describing in a nutshell here, what does teaching excellence do? Now, I talked about the Center for Academic Excellence, and really our team works very closely together. But as far as the teaching excellence team specifically, okay, that is a team, basically we're keeping up with the research, and we are going to be a resource for you all on best practices in teaching, basically, teaching excellence. And we're also overseeing the formal evaluation process that goes along with that. And with that, I am going to hand the next slide, hand the microphone here, over to John Reagan, and he's going to pick up with some more information.
And let me check first if my sound is coming. Hopefully it is. And Liz, I'll also ask you, since you have a live mic, if you're hearing me all right still.
I am indeed, John. Your voice sounds a little bit sped up, but yeah. I think certainly it is, I can hear it pretty well, so I'm assuming everyone else. I see green check marks, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, thanks. On this slide, the point that we're getting wrong reflects back to what Liz was talking about at the start of today's presentation. There is a change in how instructor performance is going to be evaluated. And that was not the specific topic of this webinar when the webinar was first planned, but these changes have all come about since then. So we wanted to be sure and introduce you to them in today's discussion, and then we will still get back to some observations about important discussion performance. But overall, with the new TE process, some things will change, some things will not. When doing an instructor evaluation, the same policies and expectations that have been in place for years now will generally stay in place. The policies and expectations that you see in the instructor handbook. The same evaluation path will also be in place. In other words, information about instructor performance is provided to the chairs, and then the chairs will interact with their instructors regarding their performance. But where the changes are coming is that there will be a new TE form that will replace the QA form that you've all seen for years when you get your annual QA review. That form will go away, and a new TE form is being developed, and there are some new details on that form that we'll talk about. And there will be more specific feedback from the chairs. The chairs will now be largely writing the instructor's evaluation based on various pieces of information that are either given to the chairs or that they themselves review in the instructor's work. And I think we can jump on to the next slide. Hopefully you're still hearing me.
John, I've moved on to the next slide. It has arrows. Are you able to see that?
No, mine has not moved, but that's just because of my remote location here. I have the PowerPoint presentation on another screen, so I see that one now. Thank you. Here is what we were getting at in the previous slide. In the evaluation process, the chair's role will significantly increase. Many of the things that the QA team used to look at and tell the chairs about, the chairs will now be reviewing themselves. The chairs will be looking at things like the instructor's involvement in discussions, the instructor's use of announcements, one of the new features, whether the instructor is providing substantive grading feedback. Various elements will be reviewed now directly by the chair, and the chair will use all of this information to write a formal evaluation for the instructor. And what used to be the QA, now called TE process, is being decreased. The amount of elements reviewed by the TE team are being decreased, and the chair will be increasing their role in directly reviewing their instructor's performance and providing evaluations which let the instructor know how they're doing, providing mentoring and assistance if the instructor has a couple of areas maybe that could be a little. The old QA form that we've all seen for years and is shown here in this slide is no longer being used. Beginning with the fall 2014 semester, we will start piloting the use of the new TE form that we're talking about today. So you won't see this old one ever again. The things that will now be evaluated in a course will extend beyond discussions. We've all known for a long time that there are other important areas of instructor performance besides just what they're doing in discussions. And so the new evaluation process has been expanded to include other areas of instructor involvement and engagement in their course. So discussions will be examined, but so will things like the gradebook for substantive, timely grading feedback for students, and announcements. The use of announcements as a way to keep students informed, to provide further information about how to do this on that particular unit of the course, etc. But the main point here being that other important elements of an instructor's performance will now be reviewed beyond the, oh, okay, I see that I'm breaking up. I'll keep going here, and if it gets so severe, Liz or Sean, maybe you could let me know. The new TE form that is being developed will include these categories that you see on this slide: Instructor Presence, Instructor Guidance of the students, acknowledgement and encouragement of students, whether the instructor provides additional information to the students regarding the subject that's being studied, whether there is substantive grading feedback. In other words, not just grading feedback where the instructor is pretty much saying to every student, good job, keep it up. PD, professional development, whether that has been completed. And administrative skills. The chair will be able to make some evaluation comments in that area too. And that would be things like, how effective the is in maybe responding to information requests from the chair or working with other instructors. The project happens to involve that, or other administrative related functions, had any in the year being reviewed.
And just as an additional note here, just to kind of visually break that up for you, if you look at the first 4 boxes there in green, those are all categories with which you are familiar from the old TE form. And then the last 3 categories there, again, just to give you a visual sense, those are categories that were not on the old QA form, which really, again, as John was explaining, dealt more exclusively with discussions. So with that, I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Thanks, Liz. That's helpful. One of the things we wanted to explain today is that these performance categories on the new TE form can be achieved in various parts of the class, not necessarily all one part of the class like it used to be when we were just looking at discussions. So, for example, instructor can be demonstrated through announcements, through good timely work on the gradebook, and through the traditional means of posting on multiple days per week in the discussions. Instructor guidance, providing guidance to students, that can happen in more than one part of the course. It can happen in discussions. It can happen in frequent course announcements in which the instructor is providing further information about how to do the work in that particular unit of the course, and certainly can occur in grading feedback. Acknowledgement and encouragement, another category that previously was only looked at in the discussion, can also take place in grading. The things we say to students in our grading feedback can include some of how they're doing and some encouragement, and providing additional information. Once again, we used to only look at discussions for that. But in addition to discussions, additional information can be provided in announcements. Just a quick example. I might post an announcement in one of my history classes saying a new book on this topic by Professor XYZ has come out, and it really enhances our understanding of the Great Depression. I could post an announcement like that. That's adding further information. I also could post that same thing over in my discussions too. And then, of course, substantive grading, that takes place, obviously, in the gradebook.
Thanks, John. I'm going to take the microphone now, and before I do, we had a question down here in Q&A, and I wanted to make sure that we address that. I'll go ahead and address it myself, and then John, feel free to jump in. It's from Cynthia. In regard to the evaluation of gradebook/grading, will the actual assignments returned to students to be evaluated or just the feedback in the gradebook? For example, I submit a lot of substantive feedback on rubrics pasted directly on their assignments. And I would say, Cynthia, I am looking directly at our little pilot form, and so to answer your questions, I would say the actual assignments returned to students will be evaluated. Now, this is something that your chair is really going to do. So, for example, your chair is going to see, is the grading feedback on the Dropbox and other assignments substantive and appropriate for the department? Well, the chair is going to make that call. Does the grading feedback on the Dropbox and other assignments acknowledge the student's learning, and are rubrics referenced to add to the student's understanding of grade? So the chairs are really going to be going in there and evaluating your assignments. And I would also add that I think this is going to vary from department to department. So I'm sure, for example, I teach English. What my chair would be evaluating would be different probably from someone who's teaching math. So there's some variation there, but I would say they're looking for substantive feedback. So wherever that substantive feedback is going to live, they're going to be looking in that particular location. And I'll see if, yeah.
Is my audio?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with everything Liz just said. It's gonna vary by chair. For example, in my role as a chair, if I'm evaluating an instructor's grading feedback, I'm going to look wherever they provide that feedback. So if that's in the comment box and or on the specific assignment where the instructor has put comments right in on the assignment. And also on Amy's question about emails being evaluated, chairs do not have access into your emails. So chairs, when they're doing your evaluation, will not be looking at your email. However, as long as your grading feedback itself in the course is substantive, that will certainly be helpful. And you can communicate with your chair if you feel that you give a particularly significant amount of feedback in emails as well.
Thanks, John. I hope that all of that, I hope that answers your questions, Amy and Cynthia, but if you have other questions, and that goes for anyone, please just let us know. I'd like to go ahead and move on to the next slide here. And again, this is just to remind you that familiar categories, and by familiar I mean these are categories that have lived on the QA form for years. These categories are still relevant in this new evaluation process. And so one of our categories has always been instructor present. Is the instructor present in the course? And John referred to the instructor handbook and the instructor handbook's policies earlier. Well, I have the policy for instructor availability in front of me, and with regards to course discussions, the policy that we have at CCC Online is that instructors are required to be present to monitor and or respond to course discussions as appropriate within 24 hours. Now, with QA, we always took a look, and if the instructors were generally in there answering direct inquiries within 48 hours, and they were in there a few times a week participating, again, it really depended on what the students, to some extent, of course, if the students aren't asking questions, then the instructor doesn't need to be answering them. On the other hand, we always looked, even if the students were pretty quiet, we looked to see, okay, well, is the instructor popping in a few times a week? So those things, instructor presence is still important. And by the way, that's something when we ask our student services department, hey, what are our students saying in their comments and even complaints to you? and also in the evaluations. You know, what kinds of things do they say about the course and their instructors? Students say over and over again, actually their #1 complaint is a lack of instructor presence. They felt like the instructor wasn't responding to them, perhaps in email or in discussions. And so this is certainly something that's very meaningful to students when instructors do, on the other hand, have a really strong presence and make that known on a regular basis. So presence is really important, and as I have here on the bottom, is considered a best practice. Acknowledgement, so that's acknowledging the students' learning. Either the students are on the right track or they're not. You know, if they have the wrong answer, you're teaching a math class, you know, let them know that right away and put them right back on the right path. But acknowledging their learning, that's something that we've looked for in discussions. That's something that continues to be important. And then this additional information is what we're calling value added. So instructors are in there and they're adding to the discussions and to the grading feedback, et cetera. You know, they're adding their personal expertise. Perhaps in a discussion, for instance, that instructor would pop in and add a web link, or, hey everyone, did you see this relevant news story? You know, did you, a new book just came out, or maybe even referring the students back to something that they read in the text a month ago, if that's something the students seem to have forgotten. And you know how it is, it varies from class to class. So just as appropriate that you are adding information as you go. So all those best practices, and those have been important and they're still important. Okay, this next slide is a nod to, again, a new category on the form that we've been talking about, and that is substantive grading. And actually, I may have John address this a bit because this actually was his feedback, but I did want to preface it with your individual chairs over your department. Of course, they will be explaining to you what they want to see regarding substantive feedback. And this is just one example. But I think this is a nice example because one thing I noticed with John's comment here is it's using the sandwiching technique. It's beginning and it's ending on a really positive note. Here's what your paper is doing well, that's great. And then at the end, the last sentence, you know, this is a great job, let me know if there are questions. And then in the middle, he's being specific. So John, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
If my audio continues to be kind of annoying, I won't read this whole thing to everyone, but it is one example of what we generally mean by substantive grading. And many, if not all of you, might already be doing this. This is no new thing for you. But it is an example of avoiding very boilerplate grading feedback that doesn't really tell the student anything specific about how they did specifically in that assignment. So it's just one example, but as we move into the new TE instructor evaluation process, your own chair may be clarifying for you what he or she views as substantive grading for your discipline.
Thanks, John. That's very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and move along here to the second part of our presentation, in which we are going to look at some excerpts from discussions in CCC online classes. And these excerpts come directly from some of our best instructors and chairs, and I think you'll find it interesting to take a look at the kind of feedback and you know, just the conversations that they're having with students in the class. And so I'd like to just have an open discussion, which we can do in the, you know, via the text here. We don't necessarily need to verbally, but just do in the text here, the chat window. We'll ask you what you all think. And we'd like to particularly look at, again, a few of these categories that are not new. They're not new to CCC Online. They're not new to what's considered best practices in online learning. But those are generally instructor guidance. So that's a very general term. that could encompass a lot of things depending on what the subject is and who the student is, right? Acknowledgement and encouragement, again, as we've addressed in a past slide, and then that additional information that the instructor would, the value added piece. So those are the three things that we'd like to generally look at. And so the following slides, we're going to show some excerpts, and we'd just like to see what you think. And I won't read them to you, but I'll just give you some time to sort of pause and read through them and just let us know what you think. Okay, the first one, of course, is from a biology course. Again, just looking for that guidance from the instructor, the acknowledgement, the encouragement, and the additional value added. Any comments? Notice that these responses, and I'm speaking, of course, I've probably done thousands of QA reviews, but these responses are pretty brief, not very wordy compared to what we see a lot of times. And just curious, what do you think about that? The fact that it's not all that wordy. Maybe that's a good thing. Just let you respond to that. Great, we have some nice comments rolling in, and I'm going to just briefly run over them in case, just to make things easier. I'll just briefly run over these comments. Joe Healy says, nice redirection in the second sample. And isn't that nice that the way that the instructor has phrased that, hey everyone, Samantha has a great question, who can address this? It really forces the students to read what Samantha said, right? Because sometimes our students may or may not be reading what all their peers are saying, specifically pointing toward a great question and holding that up in front of the class, and let's talk about it. So that's great. Nancy Dival, the first is encouraging to the student, asking for feedback from the student, and the second invites feedback from all students. Excellent. And again, you know, we had a category in QA we have had for years that's engaging and re-engaging the student, and that's exactly what's happening there, is engagement. Nice redirection while incorporating personal touches. Thanks, Cynthia. Anne says, students are more likely to read shorter posts, in my opinion. That's very interesting. Maybe you find that to be true. And I think, you know, and I don't want to imply that it's a bad thing if you have a longer, wordier post. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And what I see certainly is that everybody has a little bit different teaching style, and that's completely fine. But I do notice in some of the classes, the instructors tend to keep things very short and sweet in their interactions with students, and other times it's really more expounding upon the point.
And
so,
Liz?
Yes.
I just wanted to jump in quick on Bridget's question, because I'm sure it is a common question for all of us. I won't start my my hate speech regarding the change that D2L made to the discussion format, but all we can pass along, Bridget and everyone, is that D2L definitely got an earful from their clients about that change in the discussion format. They have said they will come back with a grid style option or something very much like what the grid was. In the meantime, one thing I can pass along that I did in my classes, which worked well for me, is I told students in each discussion, in the discussion header, I just said, please make all of your posts in the one thread that I have already started. Do not use the start a new thread function. And remarkably, everyone followed that. And that made it somewhat easier to just click on that one discussion and to just scroll down. That helped a little for me. I still would rather have that grid back though. So there's my speech on D2L.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful. I personally haven't talked to anyone who seems to be enthusiastic and happy about the changes to the discussions. I think they're quite clunky, but we're hoping for the best that they bring something back that's a little easier. And it's not just for the instructor's sake, but I think the students as well. In my opinion, it's sometimes hard enough to get students to read and participate when the format and layout are user-friendly. So when they're not, it might be a little more difficult. So thanks for your feedback and your comments on that issue. That's really important. Just making sure, going back through these comments about shorter posts, I don't think responses need to be wordy to be valid. Many students don't read past the first couple of sentences. That's a good point. It kind of makes me cringe as an English instructor, but that's probably very true. And we could talk about that a little more, but yeah, I
also,
think, yeah, that's valid. If maybe if you tend to be more verbose, maybe one semester trying something a little shorter could be something you might try to see if it works. And I might add that I think it depends on your class too. I've observed philosophy classes where the students themselves are typing and writing quite a bit in their writing skills, and probably their reading comprehension is at a pretty high level. On the other hand, I myself have taught DevEd English, and maybe some of you in the audience have taught DevEd courses. And if you're teaching DevEd English, those students are at a reading comprehension level where they really need to have shorter posts. They cannot digest long, more complex sentences, and maybe even particularly online. So I would say it might depend on your class and the level of class and the students themselves, down to the individuals in the class as well. So yeah, great discussion on this. Short is good, but I know as a student I like the personal attention to facts I mentioned. Excellent point. Acknowledging, and this is true in grading feedback as well, specifically acknowledging some things they say. Something that I see instructors do, which I think is an excellent practice, is quote the students. Joe, you said, and then quote the student briefly or paraphrase it, and then, so the student knows that you're really reading along and paying attention. And I think psychologically that's great validation as well. My biggest thing is getting students to read all the posts. Sometimes they seem to stick to the words they have posted on. It's very true. I think one thing that you can do, again, that I've seen, and I consider myself very privileged to have observed everybody's courses at CCC Online, because I see some great techniques and just from some fabulous instructors. And sometimes I see one that I personally think is good is in the subject line. The instructors will make some sort of an exclamation point, hey everyone, please read. And they make it very obvious to the student that everybody needs to be reading this, or they will address in the subject line to, a certain 3 students who have, for example, been addressing or talking about the same subject. So I agree. I don't know how you force students to read more posts, but there's some little tricks. That's actually a good subtopic we might think about addressing in future webinars and PD, because I think it's a great question.
Is my microphone working?
I can hear you right now pretty well, John.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on Joe Healy's point as well and mention to everyone that something I tried this past semester, which sounds very simple, but worked surprisingly well. I posted an announcement and also sent an email to all the students saying, be sure to revisit the discussions frequently even after you have made you a follow-up question or a follow-up question of the whole class. I just made that one announcement, and I saw greater student participation following up on questions that I posted, or to them directly or to the whole class, and not just sticking with their three main posts that they were required to make for the discussion points. I just wanted to pass that along.
Thanks, John. And thank you so much for all your participation. We really appreciate it. We love to have a lively webinar where we have questions rolling in almost, so quickly that we're enjoying trying to keep up with them. So thank you so much, and we'll be getting to all your comments. I would like to go ahead and click over to the next slide here. And this is one of our fine instructors in one of our DevEd math courses. It's very interesting because this slide addresses 2 students at one time, which is another best practice. It seems that the students did work together on this problem, so there was a specific purpose there. But I've seen the same technique when several students don't even necessarily read each other's posts, perhaps, but they're posting on the same thing. So, and I'll just leave the screen up here for a while, and Cynthia has a comment here about John having broken up in his last comment. Actually, what I'd like to do, since I'm taking these next few slides, John, if you don't mind, perhaps just typing a quick little comment or summary yourself so I don't botch anything, and just sending that to everyone, perhaps that would be helpful, and then I can go ahead and read that.
Oh, okay.
And in the meantime, as everyone's taking a look at this little comment from a math course, and some of you, I'm sure, teach math. So what do you see happening here? And again, going back to our categories, I apologize, our categories that we're particularly looking for are instructor guidance, acknowledgement and encouragement, and then it's adding additional information. So just what do you see here that seems to be you think would work well for this particular group of students? It's all the categories. I would agree with that. Good engagement and collaboration. It's really emphasizing when I read this post, and there's really an enthusiasm from the instructor with the exclamation points, which I think is appropriate. Again, as an English instructor, I shy away from exclamation points, but in this case, yes, all caps with 3 exclamation points. I believe that is totally appropriate dealing with these students whom I have a feeling are probably very, math phobic, or they, they maybe lack confidence, just judging from my experience with DevEd English students. I'm sure that's appropriate. So I can feel that enthusiasm coming through, and I can feel that really personal patting on the back, and really trying to praise the students as much as possible. And Joe says it's very thorough, which I also agree. And to your points earlier about students maybe skimming through and not reading very well, which may be a function of time, which may be a function of reading on the internet, it's a little bit more difficult, which may be a function even of reading comprehension or reading ability. But I really like that this breaks it out 1 and 2, and that kind of visually, I think, helps the students to follow along with, okay, here's my recommendation, number 1, number 2, and that's something I think you could try even if you're not teaching math. Visually, that just seems very appealing to me. Student specific, says Chad, and I agree. I love the use of the names there. The strategy works well to promote engagement and confidence. Students are more likely to have active involvement throughout the course. I think this would really promote confidence. Just, you know, we've heard that a lot of times students will pick up on the enthusiasm of the instructor, and boy, I pick up on it here. This would make me pretty excited to work these, to do these problems, actually, and I'm not a math person, so very good. I like the way it is specifically directed to each student with numbers. Makes a longer post easier to read. And again, and so what I'm hearing here, this encourages collaboration. Visually, we've got the 1 and the 2 separating, making this visually easier to read. And again, I think with this group of students, you know, making it visually appealing, maybe using bullet points, using numbers, that's very appropriate because, you know, perhaps they're in Dev Ed math, and, you know, perhaps their reading and English skills are superb, but a lot of times I think, you know, students may be struggling academically, and it may be due to even study skills issues. So just helping them out as much as you can to read through everything is really great. In fact, I remember a colleague used to use the strategy of, you know, he would have an email or a post that's a little bit longer, and he would actually insert every so often, okay, please read to the bottom, please continue reading, you know, so as the students are going along, he visually made it clear that, okay, you're not there yet, keep going. And so I thought, you know, that could be a trick to try if you have longer information that you have to convey. White space, really important, affirmation. Okay, great. Okay, I'll take this one. We have, let's see, it's 1:50, and I want to be cognizant of the time. We do have a few more of these. Personally, I think this is pretty fun, but we have a few more to look at as well. So I'll keep going with what you're saying, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is going to be interesting because it's philosophy. So this one, Wendy, the instructor did an excellent job of encouraging the student on what they did well, but then redirecting on anything missing. Then I appreciate tying in Justin following up on what Jasmine might have missed with her check. That helps because students tend to really appreciate suggestive feedback from their own fellow classmates, and she is encouraging that. I think, yeah, again, just this whole spirit and sense of encouraging the students to collaborate, using their names. Justin, thank you for showing us a check of Jasmine's answers by, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the very best way to check applications. Nice collaboration, you two. I hope you discovered that, and then so on. Keep up the good work. Again, just praising to the skies here, and I think that's really appropriate, particularly given what I know with Dev Ed students. And again, a lot of this depends on your personality and style. And we're not implying that, you know, there's a right and wrong way, of course, to address all your students. But these are just some samples from different people, different departments. We have a question here, too, that I'd like to go ahead and address before we move on from Amy Tilson. How do you feel about correcting students in discussions? I always worry that I will discourage students with weaker comprehension from posting if I respond too negatively to misinformation. Well, my immediate response to that would be if the students are in error, that does need to be addressed. And I have certainly seen posts, again, just in my QA role, I've seen posts that they tell students they're wrong, but they do so in such a nice way that it really doesn't